We hear all the time people wanting to wait until mortgage rates come down before I buy that next house. But what does that cost actually for waiting? What does 1% actually look like when you look at the numbers and the dollar amount? We're going to talk about that and break down the numbers today so you have a better understanding of what that 1% is actually costing you. Welcome into the Smart Mortgage Show. Ben George with Bill Litton at Cross Country Mortgage. Good conversation today, Bill, because everybody wants to wait for the lower rate. Got to wait. Got to get under 6, get under 5, whatever it is. But a lot of it is just, hey, what does it actually mean? Because I think the idea that you have in your head versus what it's actually going to be coming out of your pocket might be a big difference.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people are riding the headlines and hearing that a 7% interest rate, that's a very high rate. Well, compared to what? It's always a comparison, and 7% historically isn't that bad, especially if you bought a house in 1981, right? A little bit before my time, but I know that rates were significantly higher. So really what we need to do is help the consumer, our clients, understand, okay, what does that really mean? If you want to wait for a lower rate, and by the way, none of that's guaranteed, but if you want to wait for 1% lower, how long are you waiting? And then what does that mean about the value of the house that you're purchasing? We got to put all that together and really look at the numbers.
Yeah, we're going to do that here in this video. So please hit subscribe. If you haven't watched this before, we'd appreciate that support. Or hey, if you've seen a few of these videos and you enjoy it, we'd appreciate it if you hit subscribe. That's how we help the channel continue to grow. But for today's show, here's kind of what we're going to work off, Bill. A $400,000 loan, 30-year term, and then let's compare the 6% versus 7, because that's kind of where we are right now with 6% be on the low end. You could do this 5 versus 6. I think people are waiting for that as well. But let's just look at that 6 versus 7 and get into the numbers.
Yeah, so as you said, $500,000 purchase price, borrowing $400,000 at a 6% rate. The payment is $23.98 versus 7%, $26.61. So that's $263 a month lower at that 6% interest rate. So, $263, I guess, could be meaningful depending on your budget, right?
Yeah, it could be. It's not. It doesn't sound like a crazy amount, though.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where mortgages are stretched over 30 years, right? And you're probably going to refinance anyway, as we believe rates are coming down. So, but if we look at it over 30 years and don't consider the refinancing, just straight math, you would have 6% rate, you pay $863,000 over 30 years, 7%, $958,000. So your difference is roughly, let's call it, round it to $95,000. So that's the difference in 1% on $400,000.
So you look over time, it could be a decent amount over time. That 263, not quite as big of a deal. But why do people obsess so much over, that 1% difference in a mortgage?
I think people obsess over it because it's something to them that psychologically it's a steady, predictable, linear, straight line. They can get their hands around it and really understand. It's almost like a guarantee to them, right? So, a rate change is a known input on a fixed rate mortgage. So, if the effect of that change is consistent, then the payment that they can count on is going to be predictable in the future. So it's a straight line cost, and I think that's why it's meaningful to them, because it's almost a guarantee.
Well, there's the other side of the coin too, right? And we talk about the cost of waiting, and that can backfire because, as you mentioned, rates may not come down. But then the other part of this is homes appreciate. So if someone says, I'll wait a year or two for rates to try to drop another percent, what could that actually look like in terms of maybe a negative outcome?
So Ben, the really great point. This is what I think is not always outlined for potential home buyers is, we just talked about a very linear, and saving money in any fashion is good, but it's a linear savings. Well, what about the other half of the math? What about the price of the home, which is compounding while you're waiting? So if you decide to wait, all along, the home is compounding to the upside, and the increases, the profit gains annually are compounding. So, for instance, if that same $500,000 house, you're putting 20% down, you're borrowing 400,000. What if that home increases by, and this number is very reasonable for our area, 4% per year compounding? Well, if you wait 1 year, that's going to be that $500,000 house now costs $520,000, right? Now, interestingly enough, if you wait to that second year, that compound is now 4% on the 520,000, right? So now the increase is compounding, and now you're at a purchase price of 540,800. And now, not only did the increase of the home increased by $40,800, but the amount you need to borrow is higher, right? So now you're borrowing $432,640, which is 80% of the higher number. So that compounding doesn't stop, by the way. That goes on year after year.
Yeah. So, and that, I think that gap between what your payment's going to be per month is shrinking, right, every year too. And then on top of that, you're not saving as much money maybe, but also you're missing out on maybe some equity that you could have as well. And I know there's also paying rent in the meantime. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. It's never as simple as, it's 1% saving, so you're going to be better off. These are all things that you talk about though with people that you're working with, right?
Yeah. And buying a house is not right for everyone. And there might be reasons why you shouldn't buy a house right now. But if you're doing it to time the market, so one of the things that we're concerned about is, do we know that, if you took this approach in 2022, you'd be waiting until now. So now you've waited almost 4 years to buy a house. So that these numbers get more extreme because there's no guarantee that it's going to come down. So timing the market and waiting for the lower interest rate to buy, if that's your reason why, probably not a great idea. And as you said, Ben, every time the house goes up in value, even if the 1% rate decrease is available to you, your savings every month is going to be shrinking, as well as the value of the home increasing, and you've missed out on those gains. So very quickly, you end up in a spot where waiting for the hypothetical possible decrease is erased because of the beauty of the compounding gains on the real estate and how effective they are at increasing your value of the property, your net worth, your equity, all of those to the upside.
And not to mention your down payment goes up, right? Closing costs will have to increase as well. So all that has to be factored in. But this also doesn't mean that you should always buy now either, right? I mean, this is something you want to do both sides of the math to make sure you're making the best decision for you that aligns with all your financial goals.
Yeah. So, if buying now, if you're going to stay in the house for a little while, it's a great idea to buy now. If you really like the area, if you really feel like this is the one, then you could buy now at a higher rate and it's going to pay off. If you are not going to be in the area for long and you're not going to own the home for long, the appreciation may not cover your closing costs in and out. In that case, it would not be a good time to buy. Here's another indication where you might not want to buy is, there are areas in the Florida market right now where values are decreasing. When values are decreasing, you may not want to buy in that area. You might want to wait until they stabilize, because if you buy at 500 and next year it's worth 400, that's the opposite of our example here. Don't buy, right? That's not a good time to buy. Also, if you're going to be house poor as a result, if you have to take every dollar out of your savings account and now you've got your rainy day fund has disappeared and it puts you into an uncomfortable situation, that's not a time to buy. There probably are other examples. We'll stop there for now, Ben. But if your reason for not buying is time in the market and those markets are showing steady increases, that's not a great reason to not buy.
Yeah, your savings might not quite be as much as you think they are, but this kind of gives you a better sense of what that 1% truly looks like. But again, sit down with a good lending team. They're going to walk you through this. We're going to talk about the math, look at both sides of it, ask you about your goals, ask you about what you're trying to accomplish, and really get a better sense of what you need, and hopefully put you in the best lending option for you in that home that you're looking to buy. You can get in touch with Cross Country Mortgage right now. Text the word LEND to 21,000 to get in touch with Bill and his team, and they'll begin walking you through this process as well, talking mortgage rates, lending options, and much, much more. But hopefully this video helps you out a little bit. If it did, please subscribe. We appreciate that. Leave a comment as well if you got a question for Bill. We'll check those. But as always, reach out directly if you want to learn more. Bill, as always, thanks for the time.
Thanks so much.
This program is for informational purposes only. Please consult a qualified professional before taking any action. Bill Litton is a loan advisor and regional president with Cross Country Mortgage, NMLS number 147060.